Why do we normalize coaching in sports but resist it in business? After all, the stakes are just as high, if not even higher, because unlike in sports, in business, every day is game day. So if a coach can unlock elite performance for athletes, what could they do for you, for your mindset, your strategy, and your growth? Why struggle in silence when a coach can give you accountability, clarity, and help you build momentum? Isn't it time we stop seeing business coaching as a luxury and start seeing it as a competitive advantage? The following is a conversation with Alexander Van Triet, a corporate veteran and partner at LeNoble Management Consultancy. With over 25 years of experience as a board member, strategic consultant, and the ex-CEO of My Dubai, he now works as an executive coach, focusing specifically on working with C-level executives to help them with the strategy and their strategy execution. So if coaching has ever crossed your mind, or you're on the fence about hiring a coach, not sure if you need a coach, or wondering what are the benefits of working with a coach, then this episode is for you. And if you enjoyed this episode, guys, if you please do me the small favor of hitting that subscribe button, would really help me build the show and build the channel and bring more amazing guests and inspiring conversations. But that's enough from me from now. Let's get to the episode. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Hope It Helps. And guys, today I have a very special guest and a dear friend of mine on the show for the first time on this show, but the second time of me having the pleasure to interview him on a podcast, Mr. Alexander Van Triet. Alexander, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Hal. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So guys, to give you some context, Alexander and I met, I think it was 2 years ago now, at on the American University in Dubai podcast. And at the time, it was all about, so Alexander's the ex-CEO of My Dubai, and he's, worked across so many different industries. And that conversation was all about plastic and water and recycling.
Correct.
We did a deep dive.
Environmental aspects of it. That's
we did a deep dive into all of that. But now, almost 3 years later, we're both in different phases and we're doing different things. So now, to give you guys context, Alexander has been my executive coach now for the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 months since we started. Yeah.
Something like that.
And it has been the best thing I've ever done. He has single-handedly helped me accelerate my growth, not only personally, but professionally, so much these last few months. And I wanted to bring him on the show today to showcase why coaching is important, the benefits I've had, the benefits a lot of people can have, when should people seek out a coach, what are the differences between a coach and a mentor, and really dive into coaching, how you got into this, and what you see as the vision for the future in this new line of work that you're doing. But before we get into everything, Alexander, why don't you give all of us a little bit of background about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
All right. So I am an industrialist from background. Worked in major companies, multinationals. Sometimes industry select you rather than you in industry. I was in the labels business for most of my life. When you think about a label, think about a sticker that goes on a shampoo bottle or on a drinks bottle. And I was in the raw materials, so very big stickers, if you will, but like 2 meter wide, big wide. Then I went into face stock, so the top is either plastic or paper typically. Then I went into a company that made the plastic films. That's why I knew a little bit about the plastics. And then from there, I actually went to a converter, what they call a converter, somebody who actually prints the labels. Okay. So I worked for companies that worked for major brands, and that they did the labels, and this was a role where I think that we had 22 factories, or under my review, 22 factories from Mexico to South Africa, from Latin America to Asia. So it was very good. And then I stepped out of that and ended up working for a company here, which is a bottled water company, which that's how I knew them, because they need labels around their bottles, and that was the introduction. So then I spent some time there, and then from there I stepped out of it. I retired, but I'm really bad at retiring.
Yeah, very true.
I'm a little bit too young, I think, to sit behind the geraniums and do Sudokus on the couch. So I kind of picked up on this other thing around coaching, which you just introduced. It was something that I was asked to join a high-end coaching company called CMI Merrick. They're based out of the UK, but they also have offices in Australia and other places. They have a chapter here right now, part of the faculty of that group. And yeah, we're offering high-end executive coaching. And then myself, I'm actually doing, let's say, the tier below that as well, because they do, let's say, the larger companies. Think about big oil companies, big insurance companies, big banks, FTSE 500, 200 probably globally. That's the kind of pitch level they do. But I enjoy it so much. I got my certification in coaching that I just, start offering it to other people, and it's a wonderful way to give back a little bit and do that.
Yeah. So you got invited to join CMI Merrick, and that's how you fell into coaching to start with?
Yes.
Oh.
So effectively what happened is they asked me to join them because they knew my profile, my background, which matched with what they were looking for. And they said, but you got to get the certification. You got to get your diploma, because if you go work for a larger company and they want a executive coach, there is going to be an purchasing person or an HR person that says, okay, you're telling me you do this, but are you actually qualified? Have you had the training? And I talked to a good friend of mine who had been in that space for a long time. He was an ex-general manager of one of the largest fast-moving consumer goods companies in the world. And he had rolled into that coaching, but he really got completely hooked on it. So he did more and more of it. He actually got a PhD in it, I believe. So he went very far in these studies. So I called him and said, this coaching thing, is that worth it for me? And they say I need to get the qualification. He said, get the certificate. I mean, do that, because a larger organization, they'll have somebody sitting there. You got to have to check in the box, are you qualified? Reality is that with the pedigree, he said to me, for what you've done, you know most of it. So I did the training, and the training was, it was interesting. I mean, 80% of it, I was going like, kind of knew that. 10% was okay, and 10% was absolutely brilliant. Just things that you're not aware of, because it sets a certain standard of ethics and other things. So that training was really lovely. And then through that now, I'm, obviously I qualify and I do some coaching.
Yeah. The qualification part is something I've always found interesting, because obviously there's a lot of different bodies around the world that you can get certified with. There's the more renowned ones as well. So I remember when a couple of years ago I wanted to get into life coaching, and life coaching was very attractive to me. It kind of, I wanted to help people, so this kind of fit into my my wheelhouse, or it resonated with me. But I remember my parents at the time, they're like, what life have you lived to coach someone else on theirs,
Right.
And I'm like, no, but you don't need to have it. You don't need to have a qualification, because I remember at that time, more than today, coaching was like the new hot thing to do. This is back in like 2020 probably. And now that I'm a lot older and a lot more has happened, I realize how naive I think I was to think I could have been a life coach at that stage in my life, even probably still now. So the question I was thinking about, I'm like, okay, to be a good life coach, I think is a combination of, some sort of accreditation or certificate, but more it's what if your experience, you coach me, for example, but you've had experience of a 20-year career and done so many things. So your insight is very valuable because you have so much experience that comes with it. So the question I start thinking about is, let's say I came to you today and I'm like, I'm now 34. I'm like, Alexander, I want to be a life coach. Doesn't really fit, does it?
Right. So I think there's a lot to unpack in what you just said, Khaled. The first part about, when talking about coaching, there's different types of coaches. So you mentioned life coach. There is life coach, there is executive coach, there is sports coaches, yeah, and they are all slightly different. And then you have advisory, and you have consulting, and you have mentoring. So. And for me, as I mentioned the training, one of the good things about the training was that, was that it explained a little bit the differences. What's the difference between a coach and a mentor and an advisor? Because to me, before that, it was just one blob. I'm helping you out. I'm giving you some of my knowledge.
Because even from my perspective, it sounds the same.
Yeah, but they're not.
Yeah.
And so that is one key thing. The other thing about coaching is that the coaching, you can have it from coaches that are help people post-trauma. Yeah. But typically what most coaching does, pure coaching, is the purest form, is you actually don't bring in new information per se. As a coach, I have the ultimate and total belief that you have the answer within you. Now, what I need to do is help you discover that. So it is not advisory. It's not like, let me tell you how to do this. Because a lot of experience, think about experiences. Experience always comes after you need it.
Yeah, very true.
Right?
So true.
That's when you have the scars on your back and you go like, I've done this before, let's not do that again.
Yeah.
But what you can do as a good coach is you listen. You do an enormous amount of listening. So a good coach typically will speak no more than 15% of the time. And when he speaks, he asks a question. Now, he uses his knowledge and experience to ask the particular question that might be relevant to trigger the thought within your brain, if you will. But that's what a good coach does. Life coaching is slightly different from executive coaching, of course. Different arenas of play. Myself, I'm more in the executive coaching. I'm helping people with their business problems. I'm not working with people about I want to have a better relationship with my son. I want to lose some weight. That's just not what I do. I don't want to belittle it. It's a different function.
Of course.
There's a baker and there is a guy that runs a vegetable store. One's not better than the other. They're just different, and they pitch at different levels and they come with different budgets. So coaching, to get back to it, is you need to kind of unpack that. What do you do as a coach? What do you contribute? What do you do? I think if you purely have a young person that runs through the process of asking the questions, you can do it very young. When you get into let's say the heavier coaching, then having that experience, having those scars on your back, that helps you to reflect and ask the right question.
So do you think you could, for example, because that last part you said is very interesting, that when you're coaching C-suites, for example, so given your experience for a long career at that level, you have there's a lot of weight and experience behind what you're going to say. So would it be fair to say that different levels of coaching or different types of coaching might require different skill sets or knowledge? For the reason I say this, for example, is let's say I wanted to get into the coaching business now. I'm 34. I guess just think based on what you said, where I could be most effective is coaching people in like their early 20s maybe, because I'm not like age-wise, it's more relevant to me. I could understand a little bit more. Or do you get what I'm saying? Like when do I fit in?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no.
Okay.
In that, as a coach, you need to be able to ask the right questions. It doesn't mean that you need to have the answers. So if you think about a mentor, he might say, Khaled, put your arm around you. Let me tell you what I did in that year or how we did this. That is when you really need the knowledge. But for instance, take a top tennis player. Yeah, a top tennis player, take a Djokovic. Yeah, he probably has a mental coach, a physical coach, maybe a dietary coach. I don't know. He's got a whole bunch of coaches around him that help him out. Yeah, now he knows how to hit a tennis ball. None of the coaches will be able to hit a tennis ball like he does. That's why he is a top tennis player. But a coach can help him get better. It's not because they're sitting at a higher level. That's I think what I'm trying to. So you don't have to sit at a higher level per se.
Okay.
To coach a person and help a person. Yeah. You might have a discipline, you might have some knowledge, or you have the skill set to make that person reflect about that.
Yeah.
A lot of the coaching actually, if I take a look from the executive coaching, let me give you an example. There's 4 typical reasons why people come to me. One of them is that they are or they perceive they're in trouble. And so they need something to cling on to. Yeah? The second group is a fairly large group, especially when you talk about the CEO, the top dog, the division head, whatever it is, that is isolated. As a senior manager, you don't have many people to talk to. They say it's lonely at the top. You don't have many people to talk to. So, and they have a double problem there. One of the problem is the authenticity paradox, in that they want to be authentic, but at the same time, the problems that come to a CEO desk are typically difficult because all the simple problems are resolved below it. So the problems are ambiguous, they are not clear what the right decision is, but you got to make decisions or drive decisions. So to the organization, though, you are the CEO. You need to know what you're doing. You're the top dog. You set the strategy, so you have to be confident. This is what we're going to do. To the board as well, you say this is what the business needs. You're not going to go to a board and say, "Well, I'm really not sure about this. I thought we maybe, but okay, well, I don't know." It doesn't work, right? So you have to be this very confident about what you're implementing. But it's kind of like a duck sitting in the water. On the outside, it looks like it's sitting there nice and still and controlled, and underwater, it's pedaling like crazy. Yeah. That pedaling happens in most CEOs' heads.
Okay.
But they can't go anywhere because they can hardly say to the board, I don't know what I'm doing. They can't really say it to their organization, so they can ask for their input. But also there, they have to be careful. I remember when I was in my role a while back with those factories around the world. I went to Mexico, went to a visit. We did a board review there, and as I did a plant tour, I asked to the general manager, I said to the general manager, I wonder if, and I made a statement about something, if we should do this and this. I came back 3 months later, and they had implemented it, and it was a really bad idea. But my statement was purely, I wonder if it would be good. It wasn't the instruction, but the team automatically assumed that when I said, I wonder if, they started thinking, right? If I would say to you, I wonder if those fists behind you, it would be better if that be red, then you go like, oh, maybe it should be red. Yeah, I think we could be red. And you can make it red next time. Mm-hmm. Might be a real bad idea. But in that way, so as a top dog, you're always prudent and careful. And you're sitting very lonely, so that being in isolation and just having somebody to talk to get rid of those thoughts, and while you talk, probably solve your problems is a very big one. So isolation, that's the second one. Then there is there are people that have some emotional challenges. Yeah. And by emotional challenges, it can be anywhere from anxiety or stress or problems at home. Some emotional stuff that they sit with that they have a hard time dealing with, and they just need to kind of, your pressure relief valve, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is actually a group of people that want to do more. They're playing at one level, and they say, I want to go to the next level, but what am I missing? What don't I know? What can I do more? Mm-hmm. And so that's a fourth reason why people typically from executive coaching come to you. In all of those, you can help them. Even if maybe you are not necessarily more experienced in that particular field. So as you're saying, like, can I only coach younger people? Maybe not. Maybe if you're well trained and if you know what you're doing, if somebody sits in isolation, and he needs somebody to talk to, you can listen to them as well as I can. Yeah. Now, as they talk about this isolation part, if you start asking them questions about it, it helps if you got some experience and some insights. Sure. That the question that you ask is relevant and pertinent and helps them forward, because that's what you do. You try to help them forward in whatever their journey is. Yeah. That's the first time I think anyone's ever explained it in that way, because naturally just from, I think, I'm trying to keep on track. It depends what type of coach you're looking for. And I think depending on what coach you're looking for and for what reason, you will have a different set of criteria that you'll want to work with. For example,
you and I work together. You're an executive coach, so working with you, I'm looking for someone in my position, I'm looking for someone who has your kind of experience and knowledge and so on. For example, though, and you're older, of course, so you have all that experience. My YouTube coach that I have, for example, I think he's my age, maybe younger, or we're in the same age range, and I don't like when I look at him, I'm like, oh, he doesn't need to be like older than me. Do you get what I'm saying? Like my criteria of analyzing, is this a qualified person that can help me, is very different. So I think different coaching for different reasons and at different stages you will analyze what criteria you need for you to feel confident as a client before you go with that coach.
And absolutely. So there's always, in any people that I've coached, we always do a chemistry call at the beginning.
Very important too.
To make sure that there's actually a click and that you feel that you can do something. But the other thing that you said is as well important there is that I have different coaches for different things, and that's good. Now, when we were talking about your business, if you think about it, I'm not an expert on podcasts.
Yeah,
you are. You know how to do it better. But as you were running through the different business models and how can you grow this business even further, the questions that I was asking, or sometimes I would say, run me through that. And as you were running yourself through that, you would sometimes say, that doesn't really work like that, does it? Probably not.
Yeah.
What is an alternative? And so it's an exploratory road. And sometimes they say the best coaching happens when both the coachee and the coach are in unknown territory. You have that very classic Johari window, what I know and what I know and what you know and what I don't know and that you don't know, the public domain, the private domain. But the best part is where both the individual, the coachee and the coach are actually exploring new territory. That's where I see the biggest value coming in. It's like, wow, I never thought about that. So what would happen if? What stops you from doing that right now? What would your best friend say you should do right now? And it gets all these questions going. And I think that's one of the other exciting things about the coaching. What you do is people think that the coaching happens in the session. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Very often what happens is you explore new territories. And in that session, certain brain connects are made. And for the next week, the coachee walks around. And the next time you see them, go like, man, I had this revelation. I saw this new thing, or I'm going to do this differently, or I think about my business differently, or I think about the business model differently, or I think about the packages I want to do differently. I think about my clients differently. And that's what you do as a coach. You make an individual, you help a coachee look at things differently because they're sitting in their world, and you're trying to open that up so that they have a better choice to make, or a bigger choice to make.
Yeah, I think so. I wanted to transition onto the coaching and mentor aspect, because I think because listening to what you said now, a coach is the person I'm not going to tell you what you should do. I'm going to help you figure out what. It's kind of like instead of telling me, you're telling me, but through questioning to get me to see what you're like, or the advice you're trying to give, or the way you're seeing things. But I think there's a very fine line between like a coach and a mentor. So I think it'd be useful for people, because a lot of times people ask like, I need a coach or a mentor. I think it would be useful to just clearly differentiate what's the difference between a coach and a mentor as a start, and then we'll build from there. Because I think, because I'm just reflecting on our sessions, there were obviously it's coaching, but I would also say there is an element of mentoring that comes in, but it's it's not like it's almost, I feel mentoring is a part of coaching, because for you to ask me that question in that way is you mentoring me to like show me a different thing. You're not telling me it, but the mentorship is coming through the question. You know what I'm saying? That's why I find it very difficult to differentiate.
And certainly for somebody who has quite some experience. For me, it's one of the hardest things to do.
I can imagine, of course.
As if I have coaching sessions, because actually the coaching sessions and mentoring sessions are even rated differently. You price them differently, right? But in the purest sense of a coach, you do not add new information. I will only work with you on the information you provide, and I'll ask you to be more explicit about it. Example would be the difference by just the question that you asked. You said, so Khaled, explain to me, what's the difference in your mind between coaching and mentoring? Then you're going to start telling me, right? Whereas if you're into a more of a mentoring role, I'm going to put information in there and say, so, well, let me tell you what the definition of mentoring is. And then you can do something with it. But in the purest coaching form, you do not bring new input. I do not care. In the purest coaching, I don't even prepare. Because I cannot prepare. The only thing I am doing is I'm listening to you and taking you on your journey, whatever your journey might be.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Sometimes I have people that call me and they say, tomorrow's session, I want to talk about this and this. So, okay. And then we go into the session and I say, what's on your mind? What we want to talk about? And say, oh man, I just came out of a meeting, I got to talk about this. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk to me about a hangnail, talk about a hangnail. This is a classic example of a guy that a coaching session starts, chit-chat for 5 minutes. Person starts talking about the problem and the coach says, and asks a question. And the guy looks and says, let me think about that. For 5 minutes or 8 minutes, nothing was said. Nothing. And the person was just in his own mind. And then he said, I know what to do. Thank you. And from a coaching perspective, you say, do I understand that you want to round up the session? He says, would you mind? I said, no. But what happened there was an island or there's space created in confidence where that person could work through whatever they needed through. Later on you find out what happened and stuff like that. But so a lot about pure coaching is about creating the space, giving the freedom, a safety net, a very highly, confidentiality is very high. It's almost like a client attorney privilege type thing. People will not know, for instance, who I coach. I have a case right now where I had a boss and a subordinate. I was coaching them both. And after 6 months, the subordinate found out that I was coaching his boss. And he didn't hear it from me, he heard it from the boss. He said, I didn't know you were. And of course, to me, there's complete Chinese walls between them.
Of course,
But of course, he's talking about the boss, and the boss is talking about the individual. Yeah? But you got to respect those confidences. But ultimately, in the mind as a coachee, you, in the purest form, I do not give new input. I ask you to explain what you mean. I ask you why you believe that. What's the fundamentals that you're after? That's what you do. And the person builds with his Lego blocks the tower that he wants to build.
Yeah.
In mentoring, once in a while, and certainly somebody with a lot of experience and somebody who's done this a lot, will actually say, well, I got another couple of Lego blocks for you here, you might want to consider. Yeah. But the pure coaching person should not do that. It's sometimes very difficult.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
That's like if you see a friend or you have a child and they do something and you know it's the wrong thing. You just want to help them out so much. You can do. No, don't. But you just know. No, let them try. Let them try, because it's only after they try that there will be an aha moment. Yeah. We learn the most from our mistakes. We learn the most of our failures.
100%.
So the ability as a coach to not give the answer is one of the strongest things you have to deal with. Yeah? That's why you get in this balance 85% listening. Yeah, you're not there to tell them.
Yeah,
it's a journey of discovery for them.
Yeah. Coaching, I love that distinction makes it very easy to differentiate between, what a coach is and what a mentor does. A mentor brings in newer information to you, and a coach works with what I give you, basically, and we build, from there. Now, a lot of people talk about, especially younger generations, and everyone talks about the importance of mentors and having mentors. Yep. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts and attended lots of talks that talk about, the difference between a coach and a mentor, which we've just gone through. But then if I say, I'm like, okay, I'm looking for a mentor. I had someone on the podcast recently who told me, she's like, just like with a coach, there's different mentors for different phases of your life and for different, problems. Maybe at this stage, you're looking for this type of mentor. Maybe in 5 years, you'll be looking for someone else. So the question I start to think about is, okay, let's say I wanted to find a mentor. How do I even go about, the question I always think about, Alexander, is how do I know when I have a mentor? Do you get what I'm saying? I reflect on, our relationship. Before we even started the coaching, I always saw you as a mentor. I don't know why, but I'm like, he's always been very helpful, very kind to me, always, asked me some great questions, always made me, before we even started properly coaching, you were always making me think. Between any time I saw you, be like, Alexander, oh my God, I've all this new information now, let's talk. So I'm like, but I couldn't even tell you, you're like, oh Khaled, what was the moment that you knew oh, he's a mentor? I'm like, I can't tell you that, but right. I say he's my mentor, but I don't know what that, I can't even put that into words. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think in general, great leaders are by definition, I probably have to think about this, but I think they are mentors. Yeah, because they are not instructional, and I say, this is what you need to do, let me tell you what to do. They empower, this entire story about empowerment, they will help people understand what they need to do. So that is such a powerful concept, is that I'm not telling you as a great leader. And as a mentor, I think for some people it's kind of ingrained. There is a very natural giving element to it. I give without expectation of anything back, of
That's
reciprocity.
That's
true.
With
most of my, one example, I have not ever sold coaching. I have a lot of clients and over 100 coaching hours in less than a year, and they're all a reference of a reference. And it started with a person that I had helped out way back when with some chats with them about their careers. They ended up in a new job, and they ended up then saying, would you mind, I now have somebody sitting in this company who might need some coaching, and that ended up happening. So just like what you said, it's not maybe a moment or a sales pitch or anything like that. It's more I trust this person. He gave me some good help, assistant advice, was a coach. And it becomes a knock-on effect from that. It almost comes a little bit natural. And I think that's, good leaders do that automatically, I think. And that's what a good coach does. From a perspective,
So you say, so from your perspective, if I've understood, the mentor-mentee relationship is something that is formed or is created very naturally and organically without maybe a, what's the word? It's not forced.
It can. Okay. It can, but that's go back to my chemistry meeting. Yeah, so through what I mentioned before, the company CMI Merck they'll find people to be coached. They'll try to make a match, but then you have your chemistry call, and in a way, it is forced. It's not a natural progression. It's the first time that you talk to somebody, but very quickly, you try to see if there's a match. Now, I have, again, a model in my mind that when I coach people, or if I potential coachees, I actually I take a look at some of their values. Why are they doing this? For instance, I don't do remedial coaching. So if somebody's in trouble and somebody's got problems, that's not what I do. And then you have a different person. It's just not what my cup of tea is. From my perspective, is much more of people that want to grow. people that want to contribute, people that have mastery in their minds. They want to get better at something. That's the kind of people I look for. That's the people that, if I see that in people, a certain hunger, a willingness to learn, a want to self-develop, these type of things, that's what I'm looking for in a person to then coach them. So, and that can go very quickly.
Yeah.
I would say most of those chemistry calls, in about 15 minutes, both coachee and coach already know this is probably going to work. And the other, let's say half an hour, 15 minutes, is more a reconfirmation of what I already know. And then, it's about what they, in coaching world, they call contracting.
Yeah.
About, what do you want to get out of it? What is your target? And that happens in the longer scheme.
Yeah.
So if you say, 10 sessions of an hour.
Yeah.
What do you want to try to accomplish? But very often what happens, every single individual session, what are we going to do now? And the mentor or the coach will kind of keep the long-term track. But since it's a trip of discovery, you can end up anywhere. Which, in a fun sort of way, I see a parallel to my old strategic consulting work. In strategic consulting, you get called in by a company. And there's the old story about why do you get called in? Everything goes well and the board wants to hear it's going well. Everything is falling apart, so no matter what you do, it's good. Or there's the in-between, which is the most interesting, that somebody says, we have a problem, we don't know how to solve it. Can you solve this? Because we have a sales problem. And you come in. I would say in 80 to 90% of the cases, what you're being called in for is not what the issue is. And there's a reason for that. Because if they say it's a sales issue, what do you think they've been doing for the last 2 years before calling you in? They've tried to solve the sales issue and they weren't able to do it. The reality might be is that you go there, you talk to the salespeople, and the salespeople say, well, our products are just not as good as competition, or our service is not as good, or the quality of our products is falling apart, or our models are outdated. So actually, yes, you see a symptom, which is a sales problem, but the origin might lay in the customer service, or they might lay in product development or something else. So very often when somebody calls you in for, I need help with this, that might actually not be the problem. So coming back to the coaching, I need coaching on, and if it's very specific, the remedial coaching, this person has a hard time talking to his team, less of interest to me. When you say this person wants to improve, wants to get better, well, let's have a talk about, and let's talk about what you believe as a coachee is holding you back. This and this and this. Really, what makes you say that? This and this and this. What are your options? These are my options. What should be your do nexts? And just to run through a very quick coaching type session. But that's what really happens. It's you start with what is my target, what I try to, and how do I measure if it will be better?
Yeah.
Second part is create awareness. The biggest awareness, what we said before, bring some new Lego blocks maybe, but that's not coaching, but at least bring awareness. Yeah. And that's actually, metaphors are always risky if you take them too far, but it's almost like telling you, take a look in the box. Are there any other Lego blocks there? And you say, oh yeah, there's also a blue one and a triangular one. Say, what happens if you take that one out? Tell me about that one. So now what I've done is I've not bringing you new Lego blocks. What I've asked you to do is you take a look in your. I'm going to keep this. This is a good one actually. You're asking the person to look in their own box, the old carton box with all the Lego pieces in it. Say, what else is in there? And they go like, well, this and this. And they'll invariably say, okay. So that question, very often done by coaches, is, so what else? I don't like it too much. It's a bit too easy for me. I like to go beyond the what else question. But that is a very essential one. Yeah.
Reflecting on our conversation so far, and this is very interesting to me because me and you have worked together. So I've been preparing for this. I've been reflecting a lot on like our sessions and a lot of the things we've talked about. And so we've talked about the difference between coaching and mentoring. We've talked about what are the reasons people typically come to you. We've talked about why, you know, CEOs need these kind of things, why everyone needs a coach at some point for some, you know, for something. When I reflect on our coaching sessions so far of these last couple of months, I think, like you said, the coaching doesn't happen in the session. It's what happens after. And this is where I think time, the concept of time is very important. I think over the last 3 months, we've had maybe 4 sessions, you know, staggered across. So between each one was maybe a month or a couple of weeks or whatever. But that time between the sessions was very valuable, because the session is where, like, the session is useful because it's like a new, like, unlock. I'm like, okay, went through this door. I'm like, oh my God, there's all this shit here. Okay, let's figure this out. Okay, whatever. Next coaching session is like, hey man, I found another door. What's behind that one? And we go and you show
behind door number 3.
Exactly. You walk me through that door, and then I have to deal with the thing. But I think coaching in particular, whether it's with executive coaching, whether it's whatever type of coaching it is, there's a time factor that you have to take into account. Like, even if you're having weekly sessions, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Just reflecting on my personal experience, I think you need at least 2 weeks to a month, I'd say, between each session for there to be genuine change, like something to have changed, whether positively or negatively. That's my 2 cents. I guess reflecting on this past year and seeing people progress and whatever, what have you found when it comes to the time element?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's people dependent. Some people get aha moments and it goes much quicker. Some people have, it depends a little bit, those 4 models that I mentioned before, what's happening. In general, I find that it's good to at least have 1 physical session, and to do a follow-up session fairly rapidly, in a week or 2 weeks in the beginning, and that's just to create the landing strip that you have a momentum, and then it depends on what the person is dealing with. I've had a person, a major person in a major bank, global bank, talking to them, and in the second session, after about 20 minutes, the person got tears in his eyes and was dealing with some emotional challenges, the emotional one that I mentioned. And we kind of worked through that one. And he said it would be good to just do a quick follow-up session next week, yeah? Because there was such an intensity in there, yeah? I have had other person would say like, oh, this is good, yeah, I never thought that this is what I do or what I might do too much or not enough of, or whatever it was. And they say, let me work through this. Let me work through this for 3 weeks, and let's have a follow-up then. Okay. And then I've had both. I've had people that said in 2 weeks, and then after 2 weeks they said, you know what, it doesn't quite fit right now. Can we do it a week later? Okay. Or people that said in a month, and then they call me earlier and say, I kind of need a little booster. I need to, yeah. Or I got some questions. I would just want to work through this. Would you mind? Because some specific events have. But yes, there is a... it's not like, let's say, a physical trainer that I'm going to go every Tuesday and every Thursday, you know, and I go in an hour in the gym to build up muscles. That's not what this is. Yeah. I don't think that, because you have that time that people need to reflect and think about it and come back and see how develop. But development is absolutely, some of the cases are absolutely amazing. Yeah. I have another case where somebody, said, after we had a couple of sessions, and this was wonderful to hear, said he flies a lot back to the family, not in the same country as where he works. And he was always a little bit anxious, and he said could never sleep on planes. He said, man, I'm sleeping like, for the first time in 5 years, I sleep like a baby on the plane. Because he's found a certain tranquility in his head about what he's doing it and why he was doing it. Because he was struggling about his entire work and family life and stuff like that. And he found this peace. Now, this could have gone different ways. As this was a journey, when we started, I didn't know where that was going to end up, what decisions he was going to make. make some decisions, and he's very comfortable with that right now. He's very comfortable with that, and sleeps better, and because of that, feels a lot less anxiety, and you get all these spin-off benefits of that. So you can't predict, I guess. But time is an element, and it's definitely not like Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday in the gym for an hour, and that's when because in the sports, for instance, you actually train the muscle in that hour, and you don't do anything in between. In that way, it's almost, come to think of it, it's the opposite of coaching. In the coaching session, you create awareness or new insights, but what the person does with it happens outside of that.
Of course.
So it's if you will, it's almost the inverse of it. I never thought about it that way. It's an interesting one.
What's interesting to me, what I took from your explanation was, as a coach, you have to mirror the other person in terms of, like, for example, the examples you gave of, we're supposed to meet in 3 weeks, but could we do it a little bit earlier because I feel like I need that? Or it's been 2 weeks, I feel like I need another week to like really work through things. We've had that, had that too. And you have to match that pace, because it sounds like to me, what I'm taking from it is, whenever the session happens, or I'm coming to you like for this session, it's meant to happen at that time. Do you get what I'm saying? Like either
like a gym workout. That's what people expect.
Exactly. Now, so working with you in that way is one thing. So I'm just drawing parallels, for example, because to give different examples, with my YouTube coach, for example, we have a weekly call. But why? Because I'm producing a podcast every week, there's always data and analytics and a review. I'm like, okay, what did we do well? How can we change this? So in that case, I need it to be weekly, because every week we're trying to build on that little, it's more of an active process.
It's almost more like a skill training. It's almost like a training. It's more of a training, a skill set building, and stuff like that. Which makes sense, because somebody's just like, well, have you thought, but let's analyze this. Have you take a look at this? So there's very much a knowledge transfer happening from that person to your knowledge about building, podcast, whatever. Where and we get again in that, do you provide or don't you provide? The coaching is much more around I'm working with your Lego blocks. But from the sound of it, this is a person who has got a lot of experience with Lego blocks, and says, why don't you rearrange them like this? Why don't you build this tower? Have you ever thought about a farmhouse instead of a tower? So that's a slightly different. It's more like a training skill set building. Whereas in the coaching model or in the mentoring model, it's slightly different.
That's true.
It's slightly different.
You've been coaching now, so okay, I think this is something to touch on. So we've talked about the different types of coaching. We've talked about the responsibility as a coach. We've talked about coaching in general. Now, coaching, like therapy. I link coaching and therapy quite closely, because even in listening, to the stories you've said of that, that client you had who had tears in his eyes and whatever, even in our sessions, I've reflected a lot on them. A lot of blocks are very business models and stuff. That's application and different ideas. But a lot of the blocks, even that me and you have discussed together, are very deep emotional blocks that are coming into, that are representing itself in your business, in your work, in your relationships. So again, that's why I feel like the job you do is very hard, because you're a coach, but you're like a coach, mentor, and a therapist, but you're also none of, like, you're...
So I'm glad you raised that point, because this is what I mentioned earlier on, that training. Some of the things that were brilliant, one of them was addressing that point. Let me be very clear. A coach is not a therapist. I'm not let's call it a shrink, but I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to try to figure out that your dog died and that when you were young and that left big problems for you. Not what as a coach do. So one of the key things in your training actually is to recognize at which point in time it goes outside of the boundaries of coaching and it is actually the person is in need of therapy. It's a very important part to know. Yeah? The easiest way to think of it, I think, is that therapy looks in the past.
Yes.
Very often.
Yes.
About what has happened to you, and you pry, and I'm not a therapist, so, they unpeel the onion, as I've heard, and they try to get to the core, and they try to resolve it, and there's different types of methods for it. A coach does not do that. As a coach, certainly, I look forward only. I only look forward. Now, what I will do with people is I will do a timeline with them to understand their history. I will actually do a values exercise to understand what values are important to you. Yeah, if I say what's more important to you, loyalty or honesty?
Loyalty.
Loyalty. Okay. We could go 15 minutes on that alone.
I know.
Yeah?
I know.
And I can go all when aggressive. So, honesty is not important. Loyalty is not important. But what you try to do is you try to understand what people's prime drivers are. But why do you do that is only to understand where you go forward. I'm not going to question why you do that or what they came from and stuff like that. I'm not going to change them. But I will look a little bit in the past just to understand what your values are. Yeah, when some people use a Clifton strength analysis or an HBDI or a 360 review or all these wonderful things, ultimately, what comes out of that, I'm not so interested in. What I'm interested in is when you take a look at this, whatever color you are, or what introvert, extrovert, or you're action-oriented, not action-oriented, you thinker. Yeah, what I'm interested in is how do you perceive yourself? And how do you want to perceive yourself? Or where do you believe the gaps are that you need to overcome or where you can get better? So again, now I took a quick picture, but I'm looking forward. I'm not going to try to, and I think that's with therapy very often. You're actually prying in the past. You're trying to understand that, and you're trying to either change it, unblock it, Lewin models, unblock, break apart and rebuild again. And so you're actually trying to fix something. I don't fix anything. It's not my role. If you need fixing, probably not me. Now, again, if you are isolated, if you have some emotional things you were trying to deal with, if you are, have a drive for new stuff, if you have some troubles right now and you want to talk about it and you want to see what your options are, lovely. Let's talk about it. Let's go forward. Yeah? So it's but thank you for raising that point, because that therapy part is extremely important. And I would encourage any new coach or somebody that goes in that, be very aware of where those borders are, and don't try to, I'll see if I can solve this for him. No, not your job.
Yeah.
Not your job.
Yeah.
He's not trained for it. People have a formal training for that for a reason.
Exactly, yeah. I think I love that distinction that you made, because I think sometimes even in our sessions, I've reflected sometimes, I'm like, I know it was a coaching session, but it also felt like therapy in a way. Do you get what I'm saying? And which can be, from a client side, mislead. Like I could create that misconception that, he's now also my, therapist who I will share all these things with. And so I think it's that distinction of, I love how you put it. Therapy is understanding the past and fixing the past to fix who we are right now. And coaching is, we need to know the past because we need that context, but we're looking at where do we want to go. Very different timelines and uses. Yeah. So that's very clear now.
Yeah. That's one that works for me really well when people introduce that concept to me. Yeah. And of course, will people have some feeling of this was therapy? Yeah, that could be if somebody is really blocked with something and is really upset with something. And we talk about, okay, what are your options? What do you want to do? And I look forward. And he says, well, I can do this or this. Okay. What stops you from making the decision? Mm-mm. Well, this and this and this. Okay. Tell me more about that. And then as they start thinking about it, they say, well, I should just actually either do A or B. Okay.
Yeah.
And the next session said, you know what, I decided to go B. Okay, B. And then they've made it, and there's this wonderful expression my wife always uses, make a decision and live with it. And so then they've chosen B, and all at once this pressure of, am I going to do A, B, am I going to do A, B, falls off, and now they're going to B, and they're full steam ahead, and they're happy, and they're lucky to do it. So will that have felt maybe to that person as therapy? Yeah, but basically they just made a decision. A decision here for the future. Yeah. I didn't resolve a historic. My goldfish died when I was 7.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if there's any podcast viewers that had a very traumatic experience, but if that was, don't call me. Yeah. So that's the. If you want to talk about, hey, I'd like to have a goldfish and I don't know how. Well, let's have a conversation.
Yeah. That's
now we're looking in the future.
I wanted to come on to Alexander this question because I think this is a very important question. When is the time to go find a coach? What does that, because, so I was watching a podcast recently and they were talking about how whether, how you need help and any founder needs help, and they said you will pay with the currency that's cheapest to you. So to get help, for example, what do I mean by that? They said that, let's say I'm someone right now who needs a coach, but I don't have, let's say, maybe the financial resources for it. So I will pay with my time or try to find a way I can use my time to return value, to the coach. On the other side, when, down the line, when people are typically older and more successful, the money is not the problem, but time is. So I'm going to pay now. I'll happily pay the money to have, a bit more time. The question is, okay, in both those examples, it's a question of, what is the least valuable resource to me that I can use now? That's question one. But number two is, when should I even get a coach? Kind of like, because when it comes to therapy, I think therapy is a lot easier to guide because typically you go to therapy when there's a problem. I have a problem. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to go to therapy to fix this. Coaching is like, I want to go there. I'm going there. I don't know if I'm going in the right direction, whatever. I'm getting some, guidelines of people telling me you are going in the right direction, but I could probably get there a lot faster, a lot less time, and piggyback on the knowledge of someone who has been there and done this and get me there a lot quicker. But that is, again, and this kind of reflects on the stuff we've talked about in our sessions of want versus need. In that example, in the therapy example, I have a problem, I need to fix it.
You need to solve it.
Coaching is like, I want to go there faster, but it's not the same. The pain isn't the same. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
So in the one case, the way that you describe it as well very effectively, in the one case, there is an urgency.
Yes.
Because there's a burning platform. Yeah. But if this doesn't get solved, it becomes a hindrance, it becomes a blocker, it becomes a restrictor, it is an issue. Yeah. And unfortunately, in the past, certainly in business life, this is where a lot of coaches come in because the person is struggling. Let's call it struggling. Let's not say that's a. Yeah. And interesting enough, in any company, if the Peters principle, everybody gets promoted to the level of their incompetence. Yeah.
First time I hear that. Okay. Interesting.
Peters principle, everybody gets promoted to the level of incompetence, which basically means you're doing good in the job, you get your next role. You get a promotion. You do good, you go to and then you go to a role where you're actually not good anymore. Yeah. And that's where you stay. In the ultimate way, you can say that everybody who's frozen in a role for a long time period, they're all incompetent, because otherwise they would have gone to a bigger role. The danger of that is that your entire organization is full with incompetence. Yeah. Because everybody is raised to the level of incompetence. Now, it's not that black. It's not that bad. But people will go to that. Now, if you have a real serious issue, then people come in and they help them out. And there's sometimes this idea, even in today's world, where people say, oh, he gets a coach. And it's almost like it's a black mark. Right? Like he needs a coach. But interestingly, in the sports world, when we talked earlier about Djokovic, when he has two coaches around him, nobody says, oh, he must be a real bad tennis player. No, it's a different mindset. It is, he is so good that he deserves a coach, or he can afford a coach. And I believe in today's world, certainly in the business world, people are our most important asset, right? Well, if that's the case, and you have invested a CEO salary into a particular person to run that organization, or in any CXO or any head of sales, global sales, any of these top guys, one of your biggest assets, because the decisions they make cost you a lot of money. Outside of the salary that you pay them, right?
Of course,
the decisions that they
very
make
true,
cost
very
an enormous
true.
amount of money. I'm almost stunned, that top organizations do not consistently have for their top 10 people coaches. Just like it would be saying that Djokovic says, no, I don't need a coach, I'll do this on my own. Really? You're going to do it? Good luck. I dare you to find a top tennis player in the top 100 that does not have a coach. Doesn't happen, right? Not to my knowledge anyway, maybe the lower they can afford it. But if you can at all afford it, and organizations typically can, and if you think these are people that are making $1 million decisions, they are leading teams below them, why would you not have an intervention of once a month for a couple of hours? And as soon as somebody says, but they don't have the time, you mentioned earlier, the critical time. If somebody doesn't have the time once a month to talk to somebody for 2 hours, I tell you already have a problem. This is the old story about the guy that is standing in the woods and chopping the trees with the saw, right? And somebody says to him, it's like, you got to sharpen the saw. And he says, shut up, I'm too busy chopping trees. But of course it takes more and more time because he doesn't sharpen the saw. And because he doesn't sharpen the saw, he goes slower. And he is under the illusion that he can't stop working. Well, you know what? If you would stop working, you sharpen your saw, you're going to go 3 times as fast. Same thing with coaching. The guy is so busy in his work that he doesn't have time for a coach. Really? Maybe if he had a coach, he gets, take an executive. Let's say a top executive. Let's say that he works 10 hours a day. It's 200 hours. If you 20 days, it's not more. 240 hours. And I'm saying, well, I'm going to take 1 hour of that. It's 0.25%. But it's a minuscule, small. It's less than 1% of his time. I'm going to invest less than 1% of his time to make him more effective in the other 240 hours. And he doesn't have the time. Doesn't sound very wise, does it? So, who is it for? I think anybody is open to it. Anybody who's curious, anybody who wants to improve himself and strengthen can be served by a coach. Now, what type of coach? How much time? But just a moment of sitting down, no phones, no distractions. Let's talk about what's on your mind. What are the problems that you really need to solve? What is your priority? How do you set your circles of confidence? How do you set your circles around disruptions? It can be very simple. Somebody says, I can never work with people, always walk into my office. Okay, how are you going to deal with that? I have one client, I mentioned earlier on this story about the duck on the water sitting and then looks like, So I said, know that, this is an important part of what happens in the world, and everybody always comes to you with problems, and just remind yourself of who you need to be. You need to be solving the problems, but at the same time. So I actually suggested, why don't you take one of those plastic little rubber duckies from the kid's bathtub, put it on your desk, just as a mental reminder of, okay, I am the boss. I have to show control and everything, but at the same time, it's okay for me to be pedaling like crazy under the water. I don't have to know all the answers. And that is something really simple, really stupid. I'm not saying everybody should put a rubber ducky in their office, but to that person at that point in time, that mental image helped them a lot. And just gave that relief and thing. But that's for everybody at different times different. But I think in general, most people would benefit of a trusted advisor that just listens to them. Now, I know a lot of people that have a partner that does that. Yeah. There's famous couples in the world where the partner, senior guys that have a very good PA that kind of make sure that there's always times of rest in their agenda. You have people that are known as couples where they are very different, but one brings all the activity and got to do this now, and the other one says, "Okay, sit down, let's talk about this, think about this." So I'm not saying that everybody always needs a coach, no, but I think that certainly in business life there is an underinvestment that people could benefit from. And I would always dare any larger organization, pick one person in your entire management team that could benefit from a coach, and do it not as you have a problem, therapeutic, I'm going to solve your problem. No, the person that you believe will go at least 2 steps further in the organization. Who has it's almost like your gold cards. If you're that good, if you have that much potential, I'm going to treat you special. And I'm going to treat you special, I'm going to give you a coach. And see where it goes. And my bet is if that would work, in about a year later, you find that there's 2 or 3 coaches coaching other people, because that person will walk around and go like, man, best thing after sliced bread. This is great. I mean, the insight that I've gotten, the way that I approach things right now, and I hear it from organizations where I start with 1, now I've got 5 people coaching them.
There you go.
And people say, it is amazing the difference, how different that person operates and works right now.
Yeah.
And I've not trained them. Not the gym thing, not your training of your, because I do not do a specific skill, but it's the awareness, the safe space to think about what you want to do and how you want to do it and where you want to go, and what's stopping you from doing it. Yeah. And sometimes when they tell me a story, I actually, cool bullshit on them. They'll tell, and I say, yeah, you don't believe that yourself, do you? And they go like, yeah. So I go, if you want to tell yourself that, that's fine, but maybe that comes experience in the back of my shoulder.
Of course.
I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, but I will call BS on you when I need to.
Yeah, that's true.
And there's always a little bit of, listen, it's your time. You can do with it whatever you want, but and I know that's, that's. Yeah. And a specific example, somebody had to fire somebody. Yeah. And they said, well, I knew it was the best for the business, so I got rid of him and just came in, done that, and that was it, and now we can go on. I said, that's really how you feel about it? Yeah. Bull. Yeah, well, no, of course it's difficult to do that, really. What made it so difficult? Yeah, and then you start talking about it, and it's just like, I could have solved this problem 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Really? Okay. You have any other cases right now like that? Huh? What are your options? What can you do? Huh? So sometimes you also have to kind of push back a little bit. Yeah. And find that balance. Yeah. In a respectful way. It's
of course.
You're also a good friend is your most candid critic, right? Yeah. I think in a coach, you're not somebody's friend, but you are there to make them as good as they can be, and you help them in that route of discovery. Yeah.
I love that you brought up because I wanted to dive into the business aspect of this, the organizational thing, because you touched on something I was thinking about. I'm like, and I love that incompetence thing. I've never heard that before, but it resonated with me a lot, because as you grow in a company, or what I've seen, and for example, like my wife now, she's a managing director of a company, but she has not, whatever the stage was, like reflecting on her career, because her career in corporate has been much longer than mine, and not just her, but a lot of people, is when you get promoted, there's no training on like this transition phase.
On the job training. Basically throw them in the deep end, see if they can swim.
Exactly. And that famous saying that, people don't leave jobs, people leave managers. True. And especially once you get into like maybe when it's just yourself is one thing, but once you start hitting like a manager level and there are people you are responsible to, if there's any position that needs training, it's that transition.
Absolutely,
You know,
that transition
that is the biggest one.
Let me go to the most extreme case of that. The person that goes through the entire organization, its entire discipline, yeah, and then becomes the CEO. The last step from whatever they were a finance person, they were the sales marketing, they were strategy, whatever they function they had. Now they are the entire career they've been on the offensive. Yeah, I want to get my boss's job. Now they're sitting on the top dog. Now it becomes a defensive play. But there's a second thing that happened. In that last step up, and it can happen halfway as well, all at once there is, let's say they come through the finance background. They know the numbers backwards and forwards. But now all at once they need to be leading and they need to be the boss of marketing, sales, production, HR, compliance, all these disciplines of which they know nothing. They've seen it over time, but they've never really managed it. If you come out of a sales marketing organization, you go to the top job, but really you haven't really ever run R&D or finance. Yeah? And these people are or IT, and they talk IT wording to you. You barely know what a USB stick is, right?
Yeah.
So, and those are not allowed anymore. So what you have is you all at once get thrown into the deep end, yeah, already as you go up. And it's in the most extreme case when you're sitting in that top. And here comes the worst part. All the skills that you've built your reputation on was in your domain. Because you know markets, you're a marketeer, you know how to segment, you know how to analyze, you know how to advertise. And now you're leading the guy that thinks in operational efficiencies, OTIFs, OEEs. You haven't even heard about these words before. Yeah? And you're talking to your HR people that are talking to you about contract laws in India, Thailand, China, and Mexico, which are completely different. You don't know nothing about it. So duck on the water because you're in charge. Yeah. You know what you're doing. Yeah. You have no clue what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's not that bad because over time you've picked up some of the things, but you're not the expert in it. So, but at the lower level that happens as well because you get more responsibilities. You're the marketing or the salesperson, but you now also have customer service with it. You have, you go from there, you also get strategic marketing to it, whatever or the advertising budget. So you continuously fall into this new role. You might not have that experience. And you know what? The top dog doesn't have all the experience. By that point in time, it's about orchestrating how to get to the goal.
Exactly.
The wonderful, in my previous role, one of my R&D manager made a wonderful remark to me. I said, like, I'm the conductor. I'm the conductor of an orchestra, I said. And she says, no, you're not. You know, you're the zookeeper, and you keep the lion from eating the zebra and the boa constrictor from killing the canary. Yeah, because they're all different disciplines, but you need to understand them all.
Yeah.
Now, so I think indeed, as soon as people start a bigger role, wise companies, yeah. And I've just started an engagement right now. I just had my chemistry call with a person that gets a new role. Yeah, becomes from let's say a multiple country manager or country manager to a couple countries to, let's say, an entire region. Yeah, let's say I was responsible for Italy and Iberia, Spain, Portugal, and now I'm the boss of Europe.
Yeah.
Whoa, big step up. And this company is smart enough to say it's a big step up for you. Yeah, and I'm not even talking about if that person then says, oh, you know, now we're going to put you in Dubai and you're going to be responsible for Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Asia. I know how to deal with Finns and Spanish, but really? Kenya? Pakistan? Yeah. That person's going to be a duck.
Yeah.
Pedaling like crazy.
Yeah.
Who helps that person? Yeah. And it's not purely about the tactical skills. Yeah, that's where a coach can come in very handy. So yeah, anybody that goes through a major life transition,
yeah,
probably having a coach, not a bad thing.
Now, we've talked about this, so it's very interesting what you said about how I love the zookeeper analogy. I think that makes a lot more sense. But how the responsibilities that come with as you progress in your career. I believe, or what I'm started to notice, and maybe everyone knows this, or maybe I just picked it up recently, is you're getting paid. Like, the higher you go in an organization, the reason you get paid more is because you have more responsibility and there's more risk. So like your word, you mess up, that could cost us. Like, and I love what you said there. It's not just about the salary I pay you. It's about your decision could have millions of multiples on top of what I pay you anyway of like cost if it doesn't go right. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to a business, because I want to bring this in from two different verticals. So there's you as the coach. I'm curious to hear how you measure, like, how do you measure your success as a coach? Let's start there before we get into the business side of it.
When I finish up with any of my coachees after the completed session, they all get a survey from me. Mm-hmm. And the survey is the old NPS one, the Net Promoter Score. And the Net Promoter Score is the one survey that you can ask on any business that you're in. It effectively is from a rating from 1 to 10, mm-hmm. How likely are you to recommend this product, service, whatever it is, to a friend? If you take your mobile phone, for instance, how likely are you recommend that to a friend from a scale from 1 to 10? And because it is the summary of the screen, the easy buttons, the battery life, whatever. But you can do this for any. You can do it for a bank. You can do it for a bottled water company. You can do it for coaching services. And the way that the NPS score actually works is what you do is you take a look at the scores from 1 to 6. 1 to 7, sorry, and those are your distractors. Those are people that obviously did not like you very much. And you have 7 and 8. 7 and 8 are the neutrals, neither here nor there. And the 9s and 10s are your promoters, hence Net Promoter Score. If you score somebody 9 to 10, you will actually go out of your way and say, Khaled, you know what, I went to that restaurant. Yeah. It's a great restaurant, you ought to go there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the way that it actually works in point systems. So you take a look at the number of people that answer in these categories. Mm-mm. And then what you do is you ignore the middle part, the 7 8s. And what you do is you take the percentage of the number of people that are promoting you, 9s and 10s, and you subtract the ones that are 1 to 6.
7 to 6,
yeah. And then you get a score, and that's on a percentage basis. So scores might be around, you get a score of 20 because you got, let's say you got, if you have 80 promotions, people that promote you, and 60 that are in that bottom part, it's 80 minus 60 is 20. You get a score of 20.
Yeah.
And that's what I do.
Yeah.
Just to rate me, because ultimately it's in the perception of. The other way that I rate it is very simple, which is returning customers. And until now, 100% of, no, I should say 94% of all my customers, sign on for more. They continue.
Yeah.
That's people voting with their feet, as they say. If they don't like it, they would walk away.
Yeah,
there's one that hasn't, and the only reason why he hasn't is that he was paying out of it of private pocket, and he's trying to convince the HR community right now that they pay for it. So that one hasn't extended yet, but I have good hopes. So there's an intent to continue. It's just that hasn't yet. So Net Promoter Score is one that I use.
Yeah.
You can then even take the average from a rating from that 0 to 10 and take an average score. It's over 9.
Yeah.
So that's how I rate.
Okay.
Because ultimately, there is no absolute other KPI than did you get value from this conversation?
Yes.
If you come back, obviously there was value.
Yes, absolutely.
And I know that there's cases of people that have been coached for 10 years by the same individual. Yeah. Now, how that happens very often, there you have intense sessions, and then it's a quarterly check-in or something like that. Because or more often, but there's people that's not uncommon to have very long relationships with their coaches.
Yeah.
Because they've tasted it and they liked it and they understand the value of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I haven't heard about MPS in years because we used to use it as like promotional marketing material at the time. But I guess for you, listening to what you said, there's the NPS is one thing, but all the clients you've worked with so far have been through referrals. There's no, I think, bigger stamp of credibility or approval than that. Now, looking at it from a business side, because the example that you gave was great. Okay, now we have someone about to move into the CEO role. Yeah. Okay, we think this guy needs coaching. We think Alexander would be a good coach to do that. It's hard. It's very hard, I think, for a business to quantify the ROI of what you're delivering, because it's not like I don't think it's linear. And the progress isn't linear. Like, I had that coaching session with Alexander, which is why I made this decision, which is what made us this much money. That is very easy to track. But a lot of what you do, especially working with people at that level, it's a lot of intangible value that in like their processes personally, how they feel, how they're thinking. Like, there's a lot of intangibles that don't have a direct link to that bottom, dollar value. So I guess how for a business do they analyze it, or in your conversations with businesses, how do they measure it?
Part of it will be a leap of faith, I think.
Okay.
Typically, it's the managers that will say, the manager that gave you a coach says, and I want that person as coach, because you are right, it is about the intangibles, and that is interesting because nowadays in business, we are still living with balance sheets and stuff like that, and P&Ls and how we try to value companies. But actually, the real way that companies are valued right now is not on the tangibles, but the intangibles.
The brand.
But we are still, because when it started out, and I think we're talking back in the times of General Motors, when they were growing up and they for the first time started making P&Ls and balance sheets and stuff like that. And they started adding up all the assets, because it's assets and liabilities. Well, assets are plant, machinery, equipment, stuff like that, cash on hand, credit, stuff like that. You got your entire balance sheet, and that's how a company was valued. Yeah. Nowadays, how do you value a podcast company? It's fairly intangible in a way, right? And that's why also sometimes you see these M&As, mergers and acquisitions, that are crazy sometimes, yeah. Or you have companies that get valued higher and lower based on expectations. But what's the asset, right? And you see that in many companies. You see that everybody's got the same computers, the same machinery, same equipment, and one company is successful and the other is not, and has to do with the people and how they work together. This comes back to your question, people and how they work together. So if I have an individual that makes smarter decisions or to motivate and empowers the team, and that works really well, and they are beating the market hand over fist because people are super gung-ho and they go the extra mile and they understand what they're doing, yeah? Now, quantify, they understand what they're doing. Quantify for me, how motivated are you? I can do an engagement survey and see how happy people are. That's great, but it is intangible, right? I can make that better, but then I still don't know what do I need to change in order to make it better. Now, if I can work with people, or if coaches work with people and they make smarter decisions and they motivate their people better, that will benefit the entire organization. There is no line that I know of, no company that I know of, that on the balance sheet has value of employee morale. There is maybe a brand equity expression, but for employee morale, you don't have it. So it's a very difficult one. So it is a little bit of a leap of faith, but it's just like with quality. I know it when I see it. So a manager that sees that this employee is more effective is quicker in their decisions, has a better relationship with the other departments, is better with his own personnel, is better towards the manager. I had a conversation with one of the people, and he says, well, I'm really good at executing. I'm waiting for them to tell me what to do, the strategy, and basically the statement to them was, you're a manager right now. You assume that strategy is given to you. You actually have an input. You need to propose the strategy now. It's a different ball game. Oh, that changed the relationship with the manager totally. Because rather than sitting there waiting for, what do you want me to do? What would you want me to do? The personnel walked into the manager and said, hey, listen, we can do 2 things. I think we should, or we can do 3 things, A, B, and C, but I think we should do B. And the manager could say, good idea, do B and a half, whatever. Yeah. But that relationship completely changed because that person started taking initiative, because changed their view on what their role was.
Yeah.
What is the value to a company? Is that worth it? So it is hard for companies to quantify that.
Yeah.
And that's why from coaching, there's a huge range. There is the range from and I'm in the same range. You have coaches that come in at $150,000 for one executive for let's say a 2-day offsite and a year follow-up. And that year follow-up might be, if he wants to talk to you every week, he talks to you every week. If he wants to see you once a quarter, it's once a quarter. Yeah? But basically $150,000 for one executive for a year. And then you have people that are being coached for as extreme as pro bono to a couple of $100 an hour.
It's a massive range, yeah.
It's a massive range. Why is that? I think is because not everybody understands the value, and not everybody understands and you'll get different coaches. I mean, you get a ex-CEO, ex-board member, ex-experienced person in the international world, and you're sitting in the, let's say, the 100,000 range. If you have a 27-year-old person that also followed a training course, you're probably not at that same rate, because people say, my friend, you don't have the experience to be able to do this.
Yeah.
Which is one more little anecdote. I think in anecdotes there was the case of a big piece of machinery, and it wasn't working right in an industrial site. And they called this person in, and they said this person can help that. And he comes out and he walks around the machine, puts his ear against the machine, listens to it. And he walks around it one more time and opens his toolbox, takes a hammer, and hits the machine in one particular spot. And boom, the thing starts running. And he puts his hammer away. And he says, that will be $500,000. People say, dude, $500,000. You hit the machine with the hammer. That's all you did. To which the response was, hold on. You did not pay me for that hit with the hammer. What you paid me for is the fact that I've been doing this for 50 years. Yeah. And I knew that I hit the machine. I knew how hard to hit it, and I knew where to hit it. I only know that because of the 50 years that I've been in the business. So when you pay me that amount of money, you don't pay me for that because I could have given you that hammer and said, hit that machine right there that hard. But you called me in because I have that experience. Story being is, as you think about sometimes with coaches and people that are needing high-end level, you need the person that actually knows how to walk around the machine, listen to the machine, put his ear to the machine, and know where to hit and where to hit. And that might be, in this case, when do you sit with this person, where do you sit with the question, and which question do you ask him?
Yeah.
And if you're a 27-year-old or a 22-year-old coming out of, you can know the process of coaching, perhaps, but you might not be able to hit that person with the hammer.
That insight. Yeah.
That insight that just starts the engine up, in this case of an engine, but that starts that person up, and go, now that I think of it that way, I'm going to make some changes. Yeah. And those changes might be organizational changes they make, how they deal with people, how they organize them, how he communicates or she communicates. And all at once you have this cascade of things that change.
That's true.
What's the value of that?
Yeah.
In a way, it's intangible.
Yeah.
But it's not. But it's not the hit. It's not the physical, If you just add it up from an asset or from a time base, okay, he had to go there in his car, step in the car, put fuel in this car, have a hammer and hit it. Total cost based, cost plus, nothing. Experience based, massive.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah. And I think this is like to round off our conversation today. Just had a few questions, but what I've taken away from today, at least I've experienced it working with you. I've experienced it working with my, YouTube coach. Coaching can give you, like, the way I look at it is it gives you, what's the word? It's almost like exponential returns, because whether it's a big cost investment or a big time investment, whatever you're paying for this knowledge and experience, I've found, at least from my perspective, if used correctly, you've not only accelerated your knowledge, you've shortened the distance to get from point A to point B where you want to go, which is 99% of what everyone's dying to do anyway. Whether it's lose weight, grow the business, make money, yeah, there's a time factor. I want to get there. So that investment, although can feel significant, I believe if you make the right choice, of course, as well, in terms of the right coach, the returns are, exponential. At least that's been my experience. So I'm curious for you now. You've been doing it now. It's been a year, I think. You've gotten over 100 hours of coaching in, worked with people, all different ranges and sizes, teams, organizations, myself, individual founder, I'm sure you've been across the board. What in this past year of coaching what has it taught you about people?
The primary thing is that unless you're a total narcissist, most people run around with a lot of doubts in their minds and insecurity. Nowadays everybody's got imposter syndrome, right? And I think that's okay. I actually think that's a great thing, because it is self-doubt. And self-doubt is a good thing, because if you doubt yourself, you start thinking about things, right? Because if you're completely convinced that you know what you're doing, you blinders on. But if you doubt, you go, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? So that's a very fertile ground to grow. Yeah, and I think that's what people in general, they're looking for: growth, self-actualization, whatever you want to call it. So what has it taught me is that, or what it has shown, I saw all those ducks around me. And I realized there are so many ducks pedaling like crazy, yeah? But some of them are actually in trouble a little. And they need that outlet of talking to somebody who says, it's okay. It's normal that you're pedaling, my friend.
Yeah.
So let's figure out, what are you pedaling? When are you actually going backwards in the stream? It's actually eating you up to the point where it's hampering your progress. So let's talk about those things, because we can actually work through those quite easily. Yeah, and once you've done something for a while and you've got the experience, yeah, then you can actually start coaching in that. And you have to think about, is it the training thing or is it the coaching thing? Yeah. So in your business, if you say, I'm going to help people set up podcasts, right? I can do it because I've done it. I know how to do that. You've got a couple of scratches on your back on how to do it, how not to do it. Yeah. So you then can sit people, it's like, I can help you with this. Yeah. And you can have that conversation about, what do you want to do? Where do you want to take this? What's stopping you from doing it? And then in that point in time, you can decide if you want to be more like your YouTube coach. That's
sure.
Actually, I'm going to give you, so let me tell you about the sound and the light and the things, because that are tangible things that I control. Or is it more about where do you really want to go with this? Mm-hmm. Why is this important to you? What makes you say this is important? Yeah, and that there's two levels you can play at the same time. But my primary insight is, one about people is that a lot of people, in some extent, unless they're narcissist, have self-doubt, and that is a good thing. And the second part, probably that I would say, is that in general, when you talk to people, I remind people the brain is an absolute horrible interpreter of reality.
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
What
That one hit
people
home.
see or what they think is happening, my friends, the world is a stage. It's not what's happening. How you perceive things, it's not really that way. Yeah. And as a coach, you can help people, in trying to bring awareness of what the reality. It's not as bad as you think. Yeah. Or it's maybe not as good as you think. It is not as threatening as you think. It is not as uncontrollable as you think. Yeah, you have alternatives. Yeah, and that is one of the I guess the key insights into people right now, that you say, there's a hunger in general, and that's what people are looking for, to actually help them out with.
Yeah, and I love what you said about it resonates a lot with me that everyone's walking around with some type of self-doubt, no matter the level you are or whatever is behind you. There is some area of your life that you will have self-doubt. And on the imposter syndrome thing, I'm happy you brought that up, because it's been framed for a long time as quite negative. However, it kind of builds on what you were saying. Like, if you don't feel that like anxiety about doing something new or like whatever, then it's not gonna make you try harder, want to do things better, improve. Kind of like what you said. If you just like, oh yeah, I know everything, I'm perfect, and whatever. But also, just to build on what you said, I think although it's a good thing, it can, if not managed and used correctly, can be a disaster. Can be an absolute disaster. So I think...
And coming back to your story about therapy, there is people that are so extreme on an imposter that they actually need help, and somebody needs to go back in time. Why do you think this? And my dog died, and whatever. I couldn't take care of it, and my mom told me that I was not good enough. And okay, let's unpeel that onion.
Yeah. Exactly.
Luckily enough, the majority, and sometimes you have these words that become a trend, and everybody wants to talk about it. And the only thing I would say to most people in that case, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And one of my other clients, one of the biggest things that he now keeps repeating back to me, he says, I just have to realize it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. You don't have to be perfect 100% of the time. Yeah. One more little anecdote with the tennis. I saw this one the other day from Roger Federer, and he was, when he was number one, and they took a look at the statistics, and that meant that he, when he was the number one in the world, I believe the numbers that he won 80% of the time, right?
Wow.
80% of the time. Now, 80% of the time, that meant that the 20% of the time, 1 in 5 he failed. That's when he was number one in the world.
Yeah.
What's even more interesting, if you take a look at the points scored, from point gained to lost in that same time period, the percentage, he won only 54% of the points. So he won the match, but in the game, he wins points, loses points.
Yeah.
But his actually winning percentage was only 54% of the points. That was when he was number one. So people that are going after this, I need to be perfect, I can't make any mistake here. Dude, the number one tennis player in the world, right off the bat, lost 20% of his games. And even in the games that he played, he had only a strike rate of 54%.
Yeah.
What are you worried about?
Yeah.
But we have this hunger. Everything needs to be perfect. I need to control. And especially the higher in the organization, you feel like you have to be more control. You know what? The higher in the organization, the less control you have.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's more people to manage, and you can't control people.
But you're the duck, right? You have to show that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have less control. What are you going to do? You're going to be pedaling harder.
Yeah. I'm so happy you brought that back up, because I wanted to ask you about this. Why, to round off today, I just got this in 2 more questions for you. Why, when we talk about coaching in any other format than sports, does it seem confusing, out of place, not needed? Because in all these coaching conversations, when you're trying to convince someone to have a coach, everyone always goes back to the sport example and look, the best guys in the world, the Federers, the Djokovic, all these guys that have, and not just 1 millions. So And then everyone's like, oh, okay, sure, it makes sense. But then once you take my head back into business world and like, so doesn't that mean you should probably get a coach? Nah. I don't think we need it that much.
There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And that is the way that it works. Yeah. You have two parts of it has to do with when the performance happens. So if you take a look at, you have a learning mode and a performance mode. And in sports in general, the performance mode is very small compared to the training mode.
Yeah.
Take Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt trains probably for 14 years to run for 9 seconds. His 100 meter dash, right?
Yeah.
So and how many races does he do? Let's be extreme. Let's say he does every weekend a race, which wasn't the case. But let's assume that for a second. Yeah, even then, they were building it up to the peak performance of the Olympics. The last 2 years, they peak to that Olympics moment because that's when it needs to happen. Yeah? So effectively, this is a person that trains, 365 days for, let's say, 4 years between the two Olympics. Yeah. So over 1,000 days of training, 4 hours of training a day at least. So tens of thousands of hours of training for 9 seconds of performance. Zip back to business. How much training happens in business? We might define training or coaching for maybe half a day, a year. So what happens there is that in sports, you have a lot of training for a very small time of performance. In business life, in general, called on-the-job training, people are basically, just do your job and see how far you can go until you reach the Peters principle. But you're training, you're working. Oh, and if you're lucky, you might get that conference or you go to this training and very high executive CEOs get sent to Harvard for a week or two. But there's only very few and select out of a career of, in a 5-year time period, they invest these 2 weeks, very expensive, in Harvard. So you have a different model. Therefore, if you think training to performance to training, why do you hear it always in sports? Because 90% of the time, sports people are being trained, are in the gym with a coach, and that's why it's so more prevalent in it. Yeah. And I'm not saying that you need to take business leaders out of their business and and coach them but that is that model that sits in people's brain. Yeah. And add to that he's going to get a coach if he's in trouble, remedial coaching. That means that it has this negative stigma to it. And I think this is where people need to kind of flip it around. But then they always use the sports. But sports isn't like business. You don't need somebody that sits next to the guy all the time to help him and train them and work with them. No. Person is typically senior guy's pretty smart, knows what he's doing. He's gotten there for a reason. Yeah. So what you need to do is you need to mirror him up, back to your mirroring, with the person who is also pretty smart, who's seen it, who's got credibility, but who can still tell him, maybe you got to work on your back end, my friend. Yeah, and your back end might be your people skills, your strategy skills, your finding family balance, your board, whatever it is, whatever the issue is. Yeah. I will say if I have an executive, he wants to talk about the fact that he's got a hangnail. Well, if that's bothering you so much, let's talk about your hangnail. Yeah. Yeah. Because if that's what bothers you, that is what needs to be resolved. So I know you're pedaling. It's now just a matter of what is the biggest distractor. Can we reduce that so that you can perform better? Yeah.
I love that analogy because it makes perfect sense. Until you said it, I'm like, of course, there's like this, looking at the sports and business connection. The models, I didn't realize how different the models are. And when you put it in the context of performance and training, in sports there's an asymmetry of training to performance, and in business there's an asymmetry of performance to training.
Absolutely, they're absolutely opposites.
Yeah, in business it's like, it's game day every day.
Game day, that's a very good, in business is game day every day. Yeah. And that puts an enormous amount of pressure on people. Yeah. And then sometimes in companies where you have, I know a major fast-moving consumer goods company where the senior managers, are in those days were looking on their BlackBerries when the information came just out in BlackBerries then, and they were looking at cases sold yesterday, because game day every day. I need to know, did I sell my cases? For crying out loud, as a senior manager, you ought to be thinking longer term, my friends.
Yeah.
But it was game day everything. That you're always looking at that thing.
Yeah.
Rather than taking in most companies that report to the stock market on a quarterly basis, it's game day every day, because in the quarter you better have the right results.
Yep.
Yeah? You can't just say, I have a balance of. Take any other sport, football or you name it. It's train for that one moment of glory.
Yeah.
Thousands of hoops being thrown in basketball for that game under pressure. Yeah.
Very true. Very true.
Every sport is like that, and it's in work. It's game day every day, and then guys, carve out that 1 hour for the biggest asset, and it's not just about the salary of that person. Yeah. It's about the decisions that they make.
100%. And I think there's a disconnect that I think people have is in the business world is they think that investing time in training is taking away time from potential performance, but it's actually, if you invest this time, those like you said, those hundreds hours of performance that I need to do are going to be a lot. That 0.25% is going to pay off massively. It's a complement, not a substitution. I think that's the thing that people don't.
There's the classic case about it's probably a half a joke, but of the manager, the HR manager, and the CEO, and the HR manager came in for some training for people, and the CEO says, you know what, we're not going to do that, because if we train them up, what if they leave? And to which the HR manager says back, well, what if we don't train them and they stay?
Fair. Just as valid.
So you've got to find that balance somewhere. But Absolutely. It's an investment model. It is an investment model, and every investment model, you don't know exactly what it will give.
Of course.
But I'd like to think that if you do an NPS, if people come back, if the managers see the difference, then it cascades. And I think that more and more businesses are beginning to realize that having good coaches can help can help their business exponentially, and is good value for money.
Absolutely, 100%. Man, Alexander, I could, me and you, we could sit and talk forever,
I think so, yes.
And about a million different things we always seem to. But just to round off our conversation for today, I just have two more questions for you. Question to ask all my guests. So number one, looking back either personally or professionally, when I ask you the question, what are you most proud of for yourself? What would you say?
From the coaching perspective, I think the probably the most proud of, and I only realize that right now, is that I've always tried to work as a coach quietly, maybe before, or as a quiet leader to a certain extent. And I'm really honestly, when I look at that, I'm going like, I won't pat myself on the shoulder, but that is one that I am darn proud of. That I try to help people and coach people, even pre-coach being, right, which is paying off now that people are willing to give me references and to come back to me now that I'm quote unquote a retired person, although I'm not that retired. That is probably the one thing I feel most proud of. That, that people feel that they can come to me in confidence, and even people that I had conflicts with in the past, will come back to me and say, you were right at the time, or not right at the time, but we can still look one another in the eye and have that open relationship. That's probably the one thing I would pick.
That doesn't surprise me that you feel that way. Even before we started working as officially as a coach and as a coachee, that's what you're doing with me. From the day we met. So that's the proof is there, and I can attest to that myself.
Thank you.
And for my last question, Alexander, what is the message you'd like everyone to take home with them today?
Well, I think that the one message most likely is that it's okay to feel a little bit of imposter syndrome. Realize that everybody around you is pedaling as well, and therefore be a bit tolerant. Maybe also given the Ramadan period is a good message to give. But be tolerant for people. Know that people around you, even if they're sitting like a duck and you see that everything's under control, they're partly pedaling, and help them out. Be that beacon of quietness, or maybe that island of stability for them, that they can actually maybe talk to you, and you're the pressure relief valve, and listen to them a bit more. Yeah, that's probably the one message that I would do, because everybody can be a little mini coach in a certain way, and I think it would make the world a lot better if everybody would listen a little bit more and talk a little bit less, which is strange if you're sitting in a podcast, but there you have it.
It's okay. My job is to speak less and listen more in this context. But man, I love what you said, and when you said it's okay, I remember this. I don't know if you remember this, but it was maybe a year and a half ago in one of our coffee meetups, and we were talking about validation. And I was asking you, like, yeah, I'm doing this podcast because, like, I genuinely want to help people, but also, to be honest, there is an element of validation that it gives me, as authority, as, speaking to all these amazing people. And I was telling you, I remember at the time that the intention was what mattered to me. Like, why am I doing this? And because I felt like it had to be one or the other. You can either I'm helping people or I'm doing this, for myself. It's impossible that both could be there. And I'll never forget, you told me, it's like, but so what? Okay, if it is both, and so what? And there's nothing wrong with that. And like you just said, it's okay. It's okay. And that really, especially with that particular thing, that always stuck with me, and it's something that I now tell people about how I learned and how I'm trying to change. Because it is okay. I love what you said about being tolerant. That's a key. I think that's a key one, because I think, we can listen a lot, but tolerance might not be as tolerant as easy. As not as easy. But man, Alexander, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Obviously, this is one I was looking forward to a lot, because, you're a good friend, and, we've worked together, and there's so many different points we haven't even touched on in this conversation. And just to say thank you for everything. Thank you for the work we've done together. Thank you for helping me, as a mentor, as a friend, with the business, and, just everything. And you're a true testament to everything you just talked about in the podcast today. And if anyone's looking for a fucking coach, this is the guy. I promise you. Trust me. I will sign a document, do whatever you want. I'll put my name on that 100%. So yeah, man, just thank you so much. And if people want to work with you, reach out to you, connect with you, want to be coached by you, what's the best way for us to get in touch?
Through my consulting company. I have a consulting company.
Okay.
It's called LeNoble Consultants.
Okay.
LeNoble-consultants.com. I can give you the references.
Yeah. We'll put that in the show notes and everything.
Fantastic. Yeah. People can reach out to me, and then I'm happy to talk to people and have chemistry calls and see if there is a place for them to be helped.
Awesome. So we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And yeah, man, just thank you so much, man.
Well, thank you for the invite. It's been fantastic as always.
I really appreciate it, man. Guys, everyone listening, thank you so much. Please make sure to like, share, follow, and subscribe to the podcast. I hope it helps. Pod on all channels. And as always, guys, hope it helps. Peace.
Bravo. Nicely done, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Nicely done.
And that's another episode in the bag, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. The goal of this podcast is to provide, as I like to call it, education on demand. We cover a wide range of topics, and the goal is to provide you with the knowledge, the tools, and the insights to improve your lives both personally and professionally. And if you're enjoying the show and you're enjoying the content, if you could please do me the small favor of hitting that subscribe button, would really help me build the show and build the channel, and that's all I ask. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations, bigger guests, and as always, guys, hope it helps. Peace.